Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into the narrow, mud-soaked alleyways of the medieval world. Not to witness a grand battle, or a royal coronation, but to follow someone you'll never find in the history books. Someone who doesn't belong in stories, told to children by candlelight. You're not here to become a knight, a noble, or even a famous outlaw. No, tonight you become an assassin. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always a little eerie, seeing who else is up at this hour. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Nobody ever dreams of becoming a killer. Not really. You didn't grow up in a warm little cottage thinking, one day, I'll sneak through castle walls and stab a bishop in the neck. No. Maybe you dreamed of tending goats, marrying the baker's daughter, or owning a pair of shoes that matched. But life, with all its sharp teeth and cruel jokes, had other plans. The truth is, no one becomes an assassin because they want to. They become one because they've run out of other doors to knock on. Because those dreams, they died. Somewhere between the famine, the war, and that time you spent 3 weeks in a debtor's prison, sharing a floor tile, with a man named Rolf, who only spoke in coughs. You didn't get recruited. You just survived something you weren't supposed to. Maybe a battlefield, maybe a plague, maybe your own stupidity, and someone noticed. Someone who slid a name across the table in a tavern, and asked, quietly, if you could make a problem disappear. And that first time, you hesitated. You weren't born with blood on your hands. You were just hungry, desperate, cold. Maybe you told yourself it was just this once. Just this one job. Then you'd stop. But one job becomes 2. 2 becomes 10. And somewhere along the line you realize you're not good at much else. You don't farm. You don't craft. You don't preach. But you can disappear into a crowd. Hold your breath for 2 minutes in a well, and move across a rooftop without waking the pigeons. That becomes your value. Not your name. Not your story. Just your ability to vanish. Historians still argue whether organized assassin networks ever truly existed in medieval Europe. Some say the brotherhoods of silence were real. Others claim they were tavern tales, ghost stories told over ale, to explain missing lords, and poisoned chalices. But one thing is certain. People died, and someone got paid. And you? You're not part of any brotherhood. You don't have a mentor. There's no secret code, or ancient symbol etched into your blade. Just you, a rusted dagger, and a growing list of names. Sometimes you wonder if this is penance, that maybe you're still paying for something you did, or something you didn't do years ago. But most nights, you don't think at all. You just wait in the dark, muscles tensed, and hope the dog doesn't bark this time. Because this life, the one in the shadows, isn't about glory. It's not about justice. It's not even about revenge. It's about survival. And in a world where most people die screaming in the mud, survival is its own kind of power. But don't get too comfortable. There's no time to reflect. The job is already in motion. And tonight, like every night, someone needs to die. And you're the only one desperate enough to make it happen. You wake up in a barn. Not by choice. The hay itches your skin and your pillow is, well, it's your own arm numb from the cold. But survival doesn't mean safety. It never did. You pull your cloak tighter. Even though it smells like old cheese and weeks of sweat. You haven't bathed in weeks. Your boots have holes wide enough for wind, mud, and maybe a small squirrel to slip in. This is not the glamorous training montage you imagined. There are no candlelit stone halls. No wise monk with a long beard whispering secrets of the blade. No elegant flute music playing while you practice sword forms on a cliff at dawn. Your training? It was desperation. That first kill you botched because you slipped in goose droppings? That was your orientation. You didn't get a sword. You got a kitchen knife. And a vague idea that the man sleeping upstairs needed to wake up, dead. So you snuck in, held your breath, stepped on a creaky floorboard, nearly dropped your blade, and then you froze. That night you didn't sleep. You sat in the dark, listening for every sound, every breath, heart pounding like a war drum in your chest. But something changed in you. The next job, you didn't freeze. You still shook. You still hesitated. But the dagger landed. Not clean, not graceful, but final. That was your first real lesson. Kill fast. Think later. Regret. Sometime next week. No one taught you how to hold a blade properly. You learned by not dying. You learned to creep without creaking. To breathe without fogging a window. To lie with the stillness of a monk and the grin of a butcher. Historians still argue whether assassin guilds truly existed, perhaps in Italy, perhaps among Persian sects. But for most like you, the street was the school. And failure? That meant a shallow grave outside the city wall. Your senses sharpened faster than your blade. You noticed everything. Who drank too much? Who wandered alone after dark? Which servant had a limp that delayed his rounds by exactly 3 minutes? You didn't write these things down. You remembered them. Because forgetting gets you killed. One night, a thief taught you to pick a lock using a chicken bone and 2 curse words. Another night, a disgraced soldier showed you how to disarm a man by spitting in his eye and kneeing him in the sacreds. You filed it all away. Not because you wanted to, but because dying in a gutter behind the barren stables wasn't on your bucket list. And poisons? Oh, those were trial and error. Mostly error. You once brewed a concoction of belladonna and foxglove. Tested it on a rat. The rat fell in love with your boot. Lesson learned, don't test your own brews. And sleep? Sleep is for merchants and poets. You nap in barns, under carts, and once inside a barrel that smelled like pickled onions and old fish. You wake to every sound, every cough, every footstep. Because no one's watching your back. There's no mentor, no guild, no pension. Just the next name, the next whisper, the quiet ache in your gut that tells you this will all end badly. But until then, you keep learning. One bruised rib at a time. One bad alley fight. One whispered name at a time. Because in this life, hesitation is fatal. And you, my friend, have no room left for anything but instinct. Your tools aren't glamorous. They don't sparkle in torchlight or hum with magical energy. You don't own a blade forged by ancient smiths or a poison brewed by a mountain witch. You've got what you've got. A dagger. Not ceremonial, not curved like a dragon's fang, just sharp enough to hurt and small enough to hide. Sometimes it's a bread knife. Once it was a sharpened spoon. You take what you can carry. And what you can throw away fast. Because when it goes wrong, and it always does, you can't be caught holding anything suspicious. You sew pockets into your cloak. Hide a vial in your boot heel. Tape a sliver of iron beneath your wrist wrap. Not because you're clever, but because you've learned the hard way your gear is your life. And if it jingles, you die. You carry rope, but not too much. A garrote is useful. A noose is bulk. You prefer poison when you can swing it. It doesn't scream, doesn't bleed. But medieval poison? That's not clean or predictable. It's brewed from mushrooms that make men hallucinate about flying pigs. Or berries that kill in minutes, but only if picked on a full moon. You once tried hemlock tea. The noble survived. The dog died. Lesson learned. You mix nightshade with foxglove, and test it on rats, frogs, bread crusts. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it works too well. You remember that one mark who convulsed through dinner and took the tablecloth with him. Subtle it was not. And what about throwing knives? Too noisy. too romantic. You prefer something that fits in your palm, not your legend. You're not here to look cool. You're here to get out alive. You wrap your tools in rags that look like laundry. Carry them in baskets that smell like onions. One time, you smuggled a blade into a banquet inside a hollowed-out roast chicken. The trick isn't having the best gear. It's knowing how to use junk like treasure. That little pin you stole from a noble's cloak can unlock a window. Or a rib cage. Depends on the night. Historians still debate whether certain assassin guilds had signature weapons, hidden blades, spring-loaded darts. Maybe. But for you? You couldn't afford fancy. You had to make do. The back of a pewter spoon. A nail filed down and dipped in ash. One time a broken comb. Because when you don't have steel, you learn to weaponize desperation. That's your edge. That's your gear. And it never betrays you unless it breaks. Or bends. Or falls down a well. Which has happened. More than once. You carry spares when you can. But carrying too much slows you down. So you memorize routes. Hide stashes in barrels, under floorboards, inside walls that haven't seen sunlight in a century. Every tool you carry has a story. The dagger from the man who tried to double-cross you in a stable. The poison vial from the apothecary who died before he could charge you. The garrote made from the drawstring of your first real cloak, threadbare now but soaked in memories. And guilt. Because these things? They're not just tools. They're proof. Proof that you've made it this far. That you've survived the alley brawls, the tavern betrayals, the midnight climbs over jagged stone. And yet, they're not yours forever. You may throw them away tomorrow. You may lose them in a fight or to the river or to a better assassin. Because no matter how carefully you sharpen your tools, they won't save you from the next name. Only your instincts will. Your client never looks like a villain. Sometimes it's a nobleman with soft hands and a ring that weighs more than your last payment. Other times it's a woman in mourning, her voice trembling as she slides a pouch across the table. Silver coins wrapped in a tear-stained handkerchief. And sometimes it's a merchant with too many enemies and too few morals. But they all say the same thing. This must be clean. This must be quiet. This must never come back to me. You nod. You always nod. Because that's part of the job. You kill someone and then you vanish. But what they don't tell you is what happens after. Sometimes they pay. Most times they don't. Because corpses don't send invoices. And clients? They ghost faster than a jester at a plague house. You've heard every excuse. The funds are delayed. The Baron suspects something. I never met you. Who are you again? One time they tried to pay you in sheep. 2 of them. One was lame. And even when the pay is real, it's never enough. Not for the risk. Not for the blood. Not for the 3 nights you spent curled inside a firewood cart next to a rat with trust issues. They always promise double next time. There's never a next time. And when there is, it's because they've decided to remove you. Because an assassin who's done the job knows too much. They don't want loose ends. They want silence. Permanent silence. You've been followed before. You've seen the shadow at the edge of the market. Felt the second pair of footsteps that stop when you stop. One client, rich, respected, hired someone else to kill you 2 days after you delivered. You only survived because the second assassin was worse than you. That time. But you still bear the scar where his blade caught your side. A reminder that trust is a liability. Historians still question whether clients of medieval assassins followed some code. Maybe some did. Maybe there were contracts sealed in wax and whispered oaths under moonlight. But most? They hired you with one hand and wrote your obituary with the other. You once tried demanding payment up front. The client agreed. Then poisoned the coins. Another lesson learned. You don't ask for loyalty. You don't expect honesty. You take what you can and vanish fast. Because even if the job is over, the danger isn't. You remember the priest who looked you in the eye and said, God will forgive what you do, but I won't. You remember the nobleman's son who stared at you from the window just before you dropped his father with a clean cut to the throat. You didn't kill the boy. He ran. He'll remember your face. And maybe one day, he'll be the one sliding a pouch of silver across a tavern table and saying your name, because in this life, the more names you erase, the more people remember yours. And not in a good way. You think you blend in. You wear the robes of a monk, hood up, eyes down, hands folded like you've just finished a prayer. But monks don't carry daggers. And they definitely don't sweat this much in winter. You tug your cloak tighter. Not for warmth. For concealment. There's a blade wrapped in cloth beneath your ribs. A vial of something suspicious tucked into your boot and a rope wound so tightly under your belt it creaks when you sit. You walk slowly but not too slowly. Make eye contact but not too much. Speak softly. Unless you're pretending to be deaf. Because disguises in the Middle Ages, they weren't about costumes. They were about confidence and desperation. You've worn peasant rags with holes that show more than they hide. You've stolen a cook's apron and nearly been assigned soup duty. Once you posed as a stable boy, then got dragged into actually shoveling dung for 6 hours before you remembered why you were there. That job? Botched. Too tired to kill. That's the risk with disguises. You pretend to be something too well, and you might just get stuck living it. Historians still wonder whether medieval assassins had special uniforms. Leather gear, concealed weapons, boots that didn't squeak. But reality? You looked like everyone else. And smelled worse. Because smelling normal meant smelling awful. One bath too many and someone might ask if you were nobility. And nobody in this line of work wants that kind of attention. Once you covered yourself in pig grease to pass as a butcher's apprentice. You slipped. Twice. The bruises were worth it, nobody asked questions. People ignore the filthy. Butchers. Grave diggers. Dung collectors. You became them all. And still you were nearly caught. Because disguises don't protect you. They buy you moments. Moments to pass the guard. To slip through the kitchen. To whisper a name and slip the vial into the goblet. But moments don't last. You once got spotted by a scullery maid because you didn't know the name of the head cook's cat. It was Mittens. Mittens got you chased across 3 courtyards and into a moat. You swam. Soaking wet and furious. While the guards laughed and shouted, "Catch the soggy monk! You still can't eat trout without gagging. And don't think hiding your face helps. Masks? Not a thing. Cover your face and you're either a leper or a thief or both. And thieves get attention. Bad attention. Once you tried a scarf over the mouth trick. A baker asked if you were sick. You nodded. He handed you garlic and backed away. Kind but suspicious. It's not the disguise that matters. It's the story. The limp that matches your lie. The dirt under your nails. The way you hum to him everyone knows badly. You don't just wear the clothes. You become the role. Until your hands forget what they're hiding. Until your breath matches the rhythm of the people you're fooling. Until you can pass within inches of a guard captain and only raise one eyebrow. And even then, you're never truly safe. Because you can't disguise fear. And fear smells. Worse than pig grease. So you smile. You walk. And you pray the wind doesn't lift your cloak at the wrong moment. Because the dagger pressed against your ribs isn't for ceremony. It's for survival. And if someone sees it, well, let's just say your next disguise better come with a eulogy. The job is done. The blade struck true. No cries, no alarms. Just a whisper of breath, a soft collapse, and a nobleman who will never wake up again. You don't stop to admire your work. You run. Because the hard part isn't the kill. It's everything that happens next. You slip out the window barely. There's a guard down the hall who's 3 minutes late on his rounds, and for once, that's in your favor. Your boots hit the ground with a dull thud. The alley smells like piss and old cabbage, but it's freedom, and you sprint into it like a rat from fire. Behind you, a candle flares in the tower window. Shouts follow. Too late to stop what's done, but just early enough to start the hunt. Every street is suddenly hostile. Every corner a risk. You toss off your cloak, duck into a cart, then out again into a fish market where no one asks questions, except the old woman who swats your hand when you knock over her eels. You apologize in a foreign accent. She curses you in 3 languages. It works. You're forgotten. For now. But the city's locking down. Doors slam. Torches light. The guards have your description, rough, vague, but enough. Average height. Cloak. Bad smell. Walks fast. Great. That narrows it down to half the population. Still, they'll try. And you know the city better than they do. You know where the alleys pinch too tight for armor. Where the fences lean just enough to leap over. You pass by a bakery where you once slept under the stairs. The smell of burnt bread makes you gag. But you don't stop. You never stop. Success means nothing if you don't survive it. Historians still debate whether assassins had escape routes planned. Some say they were professionals with elaborate maps and getaway tunnels. Others argue most of them died right after the job because improvising in the dark rarely ends well. You? You planned. Sort of. You paid a ferryman, bribed a drunk gatekeeper, memorized a dozen faces, and still you don't feel ready. Because nothing is predictable after the kill. Especially your client. Remember him? The man who slid you a pouch of coins and whispered. Clean. Quiet. No witnesses. He's gone. Of course he is. Because now you're the witness. And a witness is dangerous. You duck into a cellar, one you found last week behind the tanner's shop. It reeks. You sit in darkness, pressing your back against damp stone, heart racing like a festival drum. You count your breaths. 20. 50. 83. Still no footsteps. Still alive. But still not safe. You once knew an assassin who completed his job, got paid, and left town. Only to be followed by 3 men with crossbows and no sense of humor. As he described it moments before bleeding out in a pig pen. So you don't relax. You don't go home. You don't have a home. Just a name scratched into the bottom of a crate and a bolt hole under the stables. Even your footsteps are lies now. You change your gait, your face, your story. You used to be a traveling monk. Now you're a mute fishmonger. Tomorrow? You'll be dead if you're lucky. Because a dead man doesn't get hunted. But tonight, you're still breathing. Still running. Still alive. And that, in this business, is the closest thing you'll ever get to a promotion. You're out of the city now, but freedom feels fragile. You've changed clothes, changed names, maybe even shaved. But no matter how far you travel, the shadow clings to you like smoke in your hair. Because once someone whispers the word assassin, everything you carry becomes suspect. Even your silence. Especially your silence. The villagers you pass, they don't know what you've done. Not exactly. But they know enough to step aside. They watch you too long. Avoid your eyes too carefully. You're the man who sleeps with his back to the wall and eats with his hands too close to the knife. You're the man who flinches at bells and dogs and the crackle of firewood. People aren't stupid. They're scared. And fear talks louder than facts. Historians still argue whether medieval assassins were seen as tools or terrors. Some say they were political weapons. Others say they were whispered curses with faces. But for the average peasant, you were a bad omen in boots. Worse than wolves. Worse than famine. Because at least wolves don't sneak into your lord's bedroom and leave nothing behind but silence and a bloodstain. There are rumors, of course, that assassins made pacts with demons. That they could vanish into shadows or walk through walls. That they brewed potions with frog hearts and fox bones under full moons. And when a noble dies mysteriously, it's never poison or politics. It's always a shadow man. Always you. Once you walked through a village just after sunset. You didn't speak. You didn't look around. And still, by morning, they were lighting torches and calling for the priest. They said the well had gone sour. The cows were restless. A child had nightmares. All your fault. Because you didn't smile. Because your cloak was too long. Because you moved like someone who knew where every exit was. One time, a priest spotted your blade and declared it forged in the fires of sin. He blessed it. You didn't stop him. Better to be cursed than caught. So you keep moving. Always. Because staying in one place means eventually someone finds out. Someone makes the connection. And someone tells someone else who has a grudge. A nobleman's widow. A merchant's guard. A cousin of a cousin who wants to make their name by dragging yours into the daylight. And daylight is death. You sleep in abandoned sheds. In church lofts. Inside a pile of hay so pungent even the rats have moved out. And yet even there you dream of fire. Of pitchforks. Of being dragged through the mud while someone screams witch or demon or he hexed my harvest. And that dream? It's not a dream. It's memory. Because once it did happen. You barely got away. You lost your knife. Your boots. Half your left ear. But you lived. Which means you didn't learn the lesson. You kept going. Because you had to. Because there's always another job. Another coin purse. Another night where the stars look like teeth. And another face in the dark, watching, whispering. He's the one. So you learn to be smaller. Quieter. More ordinary. You learn to mumble prayers in Latin. To nod respectfully at guards. To ask about the weather and complain about taxes. You learn to pass. But inside? You're still the same. A dagger wrapped in skin. A rumor in motion. And no matter how well you hide, someone, somewhere, will always believe. You're not just dangerous. You're cursed. Eventually, you stop pretending there's an end to this. You're too smart for that. There's no peaceful cottage at the edge of a quiet forest waiting for you. No last job before you retire. No warm tavern full of friends to toast your name. No name worth toasting. Because you, my friend, were never meant to be remembered. You were built to disappear. You're a shadow useful only when unseen. Even if you survive the blades, the betrayals. The curses whispered behind your back. What comes next? You can't settle down. You can't stay in one town too long. Too many people recognize that look in your eyes. Too many dogs growl when you pass. Even in peace, you look over your shoulder. Even when you smile, your hand inches toward the hidden knife. You sleep lightly. Eat quickly. Never tell the same story twice. And if someone gets close, really close, you vanish. Not because you want to, but because you have to. Because the one thing no assassin can afford is to be known. Historians still debate whether any medieval assassins lived long enough to retire. Some say they slipped into new lives, monks, hermits, wandering merchants with scars and bad memories. Others say they were hunted down by the very people who paid them. Because nothing is more dangerous than a man who knows your secrets. You've seen it happen. A fellow killer who got too loud. Too proud. Dead in a river 3 days later with a rock tied to his feet. They say he slipped. You know better. And even if no one's coming after you, the fear doesn't fade. You stop sleeping altogether sometimes. You hear every creak, every sigh of wind, every boot step in the night. You keep a blade under your pillow, one in your boot, and one buried in the dirt just outside the stable door. Just in case. You still get jobs, now and then. People from your past. A contact from the coast. A merchant's son with a grudge. They say they need someone discreet. Someone invisible. They always say it's the last one. They always lie. And you always say yes. Because what else is there? You don't know how to be anything else. You don't know how to stop. Even if you could. Once in a moment of weakness, you stayed too long in one place. A small village. Simple work. Honest coin. You almost believed it could last. Until one day a stranger arrived. Wearing a cloak like yours used to be. Carrying a dagger just a little too sharp. And they didn't ask your name. They already knew it. So you ran. Again. And somewhere along the road you realized. You've become the ghost you once feared. You don't have a home. You don't have a story. You have a trail of bodies behind you. And the quiet knowledge that no one's coming to rescue you from yourself. One day you'll vanish for good. No drama. No chase. No songs. Just silence. And maybe, in some dusty record, a note. Cause of death unknown. Not a hero. Not a villain. Just gone. And that perhaps is the only ending a medieval assassin ever truly gets. You made it. Not as a hero. Not as a legend. But as a shadow. Who slipped through history. And lived long enough. To be forgotten. No one wrote songs about you. No statue bore your name. You were a whisper, then nothing. But here. In this quiet room. In this modern world. Someone remembers. Someone listened. You lived a life. In alleyways in silence. With a dagger in your hand. And fear tucked beneath your ribs. And now? You lie in a warm bed. With soft sheets. Clean air. And no footsteps behind you. There's no job tonight. No escape plan. No name to erase. Just breathe. Feel the stillness. Let the hush of the world finally leave you alone. You vanished. But this time, it's safe to do so. You don't have to run anymore. Close your eyes. Let go of the shadows. And drift quietly. Into the one place where even ghosts can rest. Sleep well, forgotten one. You've earned your peace.